All right, so my presentation is called It's Done, Move On. Something I hear a lot in my professional life. When is good good enough? So that's going to be a question for you and your team as you're developing stuff throughout the hackathon. And even if you move on to other different careers outside of just working on hackathons, even just professional life, like if you're an accountant, when are you done? When is it good? When is it good enough? When are you ready to move on? So that can be really challenging, and it's not always clear when something's finished. Especially being finished, it can be subjective. So it might be finished to you, but to someone else, it's not even half done yet. So my name is James. I'm a senior developer at Invoke. If you've heard of companies like Hootsuite, Quietly, Foodie, those were all incubated at the company Invoke. So Invoke is a product development company. We help startups and businesses create products and innovate in different ways. So a lot of the things that we do is companies want to get on certain technologies, or they're trying to drive some sort of innovation, and so they come to us and say, hey, what kind of cool things can we do? What kind of awesome stuff can you make for us? Some of the things we've done in the past are like IoT devices. So I just finished a project where we installed sensors in fridges in a private club so they could monitor all 30 fridges. So if you know anything about food, you can't have food go bad and a fridge just break, because that's very, very expensive. They had one of their freezers break, and it cost them 10 grand to replace all of the food. So they could easily spend a few $1,000s on this innovation project, see if they can monitor those fridges externally, and save themselves lots of money down the road. One-time payment might save you $10,000 every year of food spoilage. So that's kind of cool stuff that we can do with companies that come up and ask us for help. If you want to learn more about Invoke, you can check out the Invoke website, invokedigital.co. Like Louis said, I'm also the co-organizer of the PHP Vancouver meetup. We have monthly meetups, mostly covering PHP ecosystem. Sometimes we jump a little bit outside of that if it helps us in our development lives. There was a guy at the last meetup, and he talked about Git. Git is a tool for controlling your project from a code perspective. I also used to host the Vancouver Tech Podcast, which was something I started with another guy, and he continues doing that. He covers a lot of interviews with startups and stuff like that around town, as well as talking about different events and even different jobs that are available. I'm actually starting a new podcast. It's called Development as a Service. It's going to cover some of the things that the main question that it wants to answer is, why is development so hard? Like, why is it so hard? There's a lot of jobs out there that I've had that are never even close to as hard as this job. The job's really fun and it's really exciting and there's a lot of new stuff, but oh man, is it really hard. Every project is a new project in the most literal sense. So one of the things about my presentation is that it covers some things from my personal opinion. Not everyone will necessarily agree with the things that I'm saying, but I think that it applies if you just sort of think about the context that I'm trying to put this stuff in. So I'm trying to subdue some of that rage you might have internally if you don't necessarily agree with my opinion, but I think that this slide covers 90% of what I'm going to talk about. This might apply to your project. It depends. It depends what kind of project you have. It depends what your timeline is. It depends on what your budget is. It depends on the size of your team. It depends on the team's skill, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that being said, I have this little preface here, just sort of explaining what I just explained. I'm going to try to assume some things about what we're talking about the application that you're going to make. So some of the important things to consider, or at least some things to think about in my presentation, where I'm talking about trying to get something done really quick, not get something done to perfection. So given the audience, I don't think anyone's going to be starting a professional healthcare provider this at the end of the month, or starting a bank, or storing sensitive data, or already having millions of users. If you already have millions of users, you should be dealing with them and not being at the hackathon. Would be pretty weird. And also, you're not dealing with a portion of the population that has disabilities. So you can't cut corners on accessibility if your site is about helping blind people. That wouldn't make sense. But if your website is about helping young teenagers, maybe they have better eyesight than someone who's elderly. So you think about those things. There are ways to cut corners. They're not always ethically sound. Not everyone always agrees with them, but in our hackathon, we might not need to worry about covering those type of things. We have other problems to solve. So I'm going to just do a little quick survey about the people that are here. Is anyone here a developer, consider themselves a developer, or is going to take on the development role during the hackathon? A couple people. Anyone taking on like a design role, doing any designs or working with graphics? A couple people. Anyone sort of doing some planning or some like business planning or anything like that? Trying to plan some strategy, trying to figure out business plan, maybe do some research. check out competition, stuff like that. Is anyone doing anything like that? Not really? Luis, one other person? Cool. All right. So I just wanted to see like what the breakdown was, because I'll try to cover, especially with design development, there is an overlap because one has to come before the other sometimes. So I'll try to cover those things. So the main question that you'd ask, or the first question you might ask, is why would you move on from something? How do you know that it's done? Or why would you move on? Why even consider not finishing something? Well, one of those things might be time. You just don't have the time to finish. In the case of a hackathon, we don't have the time to finish everything to perfection. We can work on a narrow set of problems and try to get those as close as we can to done, but given the nature of the presentation or the nature of the event that we're attending, we don't always have the luxury of time. This doesn't necessarily apply. The next one is money. Unless you're paying your team members, you might not be able to afford to keep moving on, or you might not be able to afford to continue working on a project. This is kind of like, I'll take a little tangent, but this is kind of where this applies to, like, it doesn't really matter what the job you're doing is. I mean, you could be working part-time at a certain job right now, and you're just trying to be like, I don't have the time, and we can't afford to finish this anyway, so we need to find a way to get what we can with what we're working with. Does anyone know the concept of an MVP? It's a minimum viable product. And what that means is the term gets thrown around a lot, and I don't think people always agree because it's very literal. It's the minimum amount of work to create the most viable product. So what that means is, I think the founder of LinkedIn said something like, if you're not embarrassed by your first release, you release too late. So what they're saying is, it works and it's ugly, but it's minimum, it's viable, and it's our product. So think about MVP when you're building your application, or you're providing your service, or you're thinking about the thing that you're making this on the weekend of hackathon. Is it an MVP? Is it the minimum viable version of the product that you're trying to create? That's a good question to ask yourself, and keep asking yourself that question. Yep.
Would you say that applies even in professional, I mean, not in the context of a hackathon, but professionally when you're developing a product, do you think this would still apply?
Yeah, we use it all the time to talk to our clients. So the question was, is MVP still applicable outside of hackathons? Yes, absolutely. So Facebook, anyone, Google, they're going to use this term too. They use it in a different context. What Google considers a minimum viable product is quite a bit different from what a freelance designer considers a minimum viable product, right? The baggage of the company is important to consider. So a multi-million dollar, or in the case of Google, billion-dollar company, or even Apple, like, what do you think the first version of the Siri was? It kind of worked. It wasn't perfect. It was minimal. It was viable. It was a great product, a great start. It just keeps getting better, right? They didn't roll out the ultimate version of Siri immediately, right? It takes time. Like, it might not even be worth it. Think about companies that have released some of their own versions or copies of some of these greater services. Facebook's kind of great and terrible at this. They release copies of other apps when apps don't want to, like, sell to them. So Snapchat, they had like some sort of Snapchat phone that they released, and it just didn't really work. So did they shut down Facebook to pivot to this new product? No, they kind of made this minimum version. They implemented the set of features that they thought they could capture users with, and they released it out to the public. Unfortunately, it didn't take. So with minimum and viable, it was minimum and viable. That was what the product was. It made the product, but the problem or the issue that they ran into was nobody wanted it. So instead of investing more and trying to keep and doubling down, they said, cool, now we know that's not going to work. Let's buy Instagram instead. So when is something done? So you might know when you need to finish. You run out of time, you run out of money, or you decide the thing isn't in the MVP, it isn't in the middle of the minimum viable product. So when is it actually finished? Only you and your team will know that. Only your team will know if something is done. Unless someone notices that it's not done. So that would be like the public notices that it's not done. The great thing about knowing about you being the one who decides when it's done is that you can decide how big it is and what kind of things are included inside of it. If you don't think you can get to the state that you want, where you'd be happy with the minimum viable version, you can always remove things. It's way harder to remove things than it is to add more. Think about a table. You can make a table out of a piece of plywood. You can add some legs to it. You can add one. It's a minimum version of a table. You could add 2 legs to it. Whoa, you got 2 legs on a table now. That's a real halfway point. You can add a third leg. It doesn't stand very well, but maybe if you hold one edge, you have a table. And then eventually you can add stuff. But if you start with the most amount of legs you can, you might find you don't actually need that many. You need 4, one on each corner. You don't need one along every 10 inches along the side on all sides. So thinking about that of like, I can always add things later. I can keep adding something, adding stuff. This is also called progressive enhancement. So how would you move on from something? So, you're kind of deciding like, when is it done? The answer is, I don't really know. You might know. So when do you actually decide, okay, well, I think it's done, so we should move on. So the best thing to know about when to move on is understand where you're going. So the journey of 1,000 steps starts with one, or the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. Like you have to know where you're going in order to take that first step. So one thing is like prioritizing features or prioritizing activities, prioritizing tasks. If everything is top priority, nothing is top priority. I encountered a document internally at the company I worked with, and everything was like priority 5, maximum priority. Where do I start? Everything is of the utmost importance. So I don't know where to start. Let's say we're building the table again, and it says the number 5 is the table should be finished, and priority 5 is that it should have all the legs. Priority 5 is that it should hold 100 pounds. Like, oh man, I don't even know where to start because like the table has to be done and hold 100 pounds at the same time. I can't test the table if it holds 100 pounds unless I finish the table first. But according to my list of priorities, testing it and assembling it are the same. But they do have a sequence. The sequence is just wrong. The priority is wrong. Okay, first I need to do this, then I can do this. Putting things in order from maybe their dependencies, organizing them from what depends on something else, but also organizing it from like a logical standpoint. Okay, well I need to buy the equipment before I can like assemble the table. I need to buy the legs before I can put them on. Stuff like that. So I think one big important thing that I've sort of been thinking about lately is having a primary goal. So if you have a primary goal, it means you always know where you're going. So I actually have a little case study here, like to sort of communicate what the primary goal is or how to use a primary goal to get to where you want to go. So let's pretend that we have like a social network, okay? It's just, all we want to do is like make posts and we want users to join. Think about like any social network. So like Facebook, Google+, Twitter. Their whole goal is to get you to post. They want you to come back and post. I'm sure you've gotten tons of emails saying, hey, your friends are doing stuff on Facebook. You should come back and check it out. Hey, you should post. I saw a tweet the other day. Someone posted a screenshot of Facebook saying, hey, you've posted 3 days in a row. You should keep posting. You're on a streak. I think Snapchat does that too. It tells you like, hey, you're on a streak. You should keep posting. Because the more you post, the more people come to the site. So our primary goal in our fake social network is to make a user post. That's our goal. We want them to post something. So I've kind of had this concept of working backwards from the primary goal. So our goal is to get them to post. Okay, so in order to post, what do they need? They probably need an account because we need to like post from their account, right? So they need an account. Okay, well how do they get an account? Okay, well they need to sign up. They need to sign up to the site to get an account. Okay, well how do they sign up to the site? Well, they actually have to visit the site first. So by using that flow, we can figure out, okay, well, what kind of features do we need to support these different things? So we need the ability to create and manage a post. If you don't know what CRUD is, CRUD means create, read, update, delete. Those are the 4 things you can do to a post. You can create a post, you can read a post, like you can view it, you can update a post, edit, or you can delete a post, right? So those same rules apply to an account, and I'm going to show another slide here that'll sort of loop this all together, and then whether or not they're visiting the site doesn't really apply, but we might need to manage the pages, right? That's what the CRUD is. I need to create a page, read a page, view a page, update a page, delete a page. So I need to be able to create a sign-up page. I need to create a home page where they might land on. And so this creates something called a domain. So I've used these words. I've used the word post. I've used the word account. I've used the word sign-up. I've even used the word site. These words that I'm using are specific. They sort of outline what my application is about. So Facebook might call you a user, but then Instagram might call you a person. Like, oh, we want people. Or Snapchat might call you a ghost, or whatever they might call you. People have specific words that they call their customers. You might even see people use like customer, partner, even things like even the difference between customer and client. People use those two words interchangeably, but they don't mean the same thing. Especially if you're very specific about the way you choose your words. You probably notice this in marketing material. If you ever go to like a university website, they might talk about like family a lot. You might go to a different website and they talk about like friendship a lot or like relationships a lot. So you can actually see this in marketing material where they're using very specific words because they're trying to convey something very specific. So by knowing what our domain is, by creating a domain, creating an area where we can put these words into, we can sort of create these little boxes. So we know we have posts. We have a bunch of stuff about posts. We have a bunch of stuff about accounts. And we have a bunch of stuff about pages on our site. So just by working backwards from our primary goal, we actually have a lot of information. We know we have to create a bunch of like a posting experience. We know we have to create a sign up and account creation experience. And we know we have to create like a website experience. So what's in a website experience? Okay, we then browse around. We have to entice them to sign up. Okay, well, how do they sign up? Well, they visit these pages. We need a sign-up form. We need error handling for that form. We need to validate the form. We might need to send an email. Okay, they have an account now. Well, they need to manage their profile. They need to change their photo. They need to change their name. They have to add their email. So we're getting all this stuff just from working backwards from them having, all we want them to do is make a post. But by working backwards from them making a post, we now know all this other stuff that we need to make first. And this is actually in order. So we can say, okay, we can work in reverse order in our design. If you're a designer, you could work in reverse because you know all the things that you need to design in order for a post to be made. If you're a developer, you can work in reverse. You can say, okay, I need to make a post. What does a post consist of? It's attached to an account. An account is attached to something else. It's attached to user details or whatever it might be. So you can kind of like get to where you need to go by seeing where you need to be in the future. So story time. So I have a couple story time breaks here. But I was working on an application that was, it was a music application. And the idea was that the users would sign in and create an account and they could buy music on the site. That's cool. It's pretty straightforward. E-commerce, they're buying some products online. The same way you shop on like Amazon or Nike or the way you buy anything online. The thing is, we're talking about having social login for SoundCloud, which kind of makes sense if you were selling music or you're like a music site. SoundCloud, a lot of musicians use it. A lot of people who like music use it. I used to use it in college to like track all the cool songs that I like that would like come out. I would like favorite them and stuff like that. The thing is though, even if we have social login, we still need to have a normal login for all those people that don't have SoundCloud. We can't just have SoundCloud login. Some applications do that. I know, and I think Tinder does that with Facebook. Like you have to have Facebook or you can't even use the app. So like some apps do that, but a lot of them don't, and that's a barrier to entry for a lot of people. They're just like, I don't want to connect my Facebook to anything, or I don't even have Facebook, or I deleted it, or whatever, or I want to be on Facebook. That's fine, but we're going to lose users if we only support SoundCloud. So we have to support both. Well, do we have to support both? Because like we need one of them regardless of what the social login. The social login could be Twitter, could be anything. It could be a social network no one's even heard of. But we always need email and password sign up. So what are we gaining by adding social login? Are we gaining more users? Well, they all have emails and passwords anyway, or they wouldn't be able to sign up for SoundCloud. Well, are they getting something from SoundCloud they don't already have from like username and password from like emails? Not really. I mean, they have like clicking and signing it. They still have to click, sign into SoundCloud, and come back to our application. It sounds like we're not getting anything by adding this thing. Is it changing our primary goal? Our primary goal is to sell music. By adding SoundCloud, are we selling more music? I don't think so. Is our experience for signing up faster? Maybe it's a little faster. But is that actually affecting our primary goal in a significant way? If we had a day, would we spend a day improving the login by adding social login? Or maybe we would improve the current login? Or maybe we'd work on some other part of the site. Maybe we'd work on the checkout experience, make it a little smoother, make it a little nicer, improving the copy, improving the design. Think about like the budget that you have to spend on your product or your application. Where are you going to put it? If you're putting it on things that don't affect your main goal, it probably isn't a good place to put that energy. So here's a good question. Did anyone notice Did anyone notice that that thing was really messed up or that didn't work? Because if no one noticed, then it means it wasn't important. Unfortunately, that goes to things in your personal life as well. If no one notices the work that you're doing, maybe you're advertising it wrong or no one notices. No one cares, which is a shitty feeling, but it tells you something. Maybe you should focus your energy on something else. For example, developers are really bad at this. They'll make these tools and stuff. And I'm like, I made this cool tool for doing this very specific thing. And then the community's like, I don't want that. That's for you. I don't need that. I have like 10 other apps that do the same thing. I think about messaging. Messaging these days, there's every other app has messaging in it. It's like, oh my God. I think Craigslist is one of those sites that's like, we just use email because everyone has it. It's email. There's no WhatsApp login. There's no Facebook login. There's no Instagram hookup. Like, it's just, you use email because you have it. How'd you get on here if you didn't have email? How'd you even get a computer if you don't have email? So one of those things is like, can you use content and communication to mitigate more work? So instead of adding more features and developing more features, development and design is expensive. It takes a long time. Being very concise and communicating a message, it can be really difficult too. But if you think about something for even just a little bit, you can probably find a better way to talk about it, better way to communicate it, and that might actually mitigate making more work. For example, if you have a field and it requires a phone number. And you know what, you're like, oh, you know what, I just don't have the time to write all the validation for phone numbers and area codes, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm just going to maybe you put instruction. Maybe you put an example of what a good phone number looks like. Hopefully, most people will adhere to that format. A lot of people won't. They'll just like blast right past it. But maybe you don't have to be as extreme with your assertions because you can sort of tell someone, just like you tell someone, hey, stop touching my shoulder, instead of just hoping that they figure out that you're not supposed to do it by like trying to dodge them touching your shoulder. Just tell them, be explicit. Use communication to mitigate problems. So this is another one. It's like, does the average user realize it isn't done? So if you have something that's not finished, and you show it to someone not even on your team, show it to another team in the hackathon. Show them the work and be like, hey, what do you think of this? And like, oh, that's really cool. That's awesome. Don't ask if there's anything missing, because then they're going to look for missing stuff. That goes for any industry, even if you're like at a restaurant. Did you have a good meal? I guess it was okay. You're asking them to complain. You're asking for someone to complain when you ask them if something's missing, if something's wrong. So don't ask them that, because they're just going to complain. So ask them things like, what do you think about this piece? Try to be a bit more neutral with your questions. Like, what do you think about the header? Don't lead them in any way. Have them propagate their opinion to you. You don't want to influence them. That's bias. You don't want bias because you're just going to confirm what you already know. You don't want bias from negative bias because they're just going to tear apart something you already think is bad. Try to get their honest opinion about something. It can be really easy. And it can be really important because it can mean, hey, does anyone even care about this? Does anyone realize this thing isn't done? I've worked on tons of projects where a client was saying like, hey, we need to spend more time like on our about page. It's so important that it looks amazing and it's crazy. Then you look at their analytics a year later and their about page is like the lowest page on their whole site. So why'd you spend 90% of your budget on the lowest performing page? Instead, they missed their homepage. Their blog sucks. Their contact page is terrible. They don't have many leads. The bounce rate is through the roof on the website. Instead, they spent all their energy on how someone reads their about page when it's the worst performing page on their whole site. Maybe that says something more about the site or something about the paid content that's on the page. But you need to be scientific about what you're going to spend your time on. So the thing is, are you and your team the only people that actually care about this thing? They have to know if you care. I mean, if you show your homepage to another team at the hackathon, and you're really, really concerned about the navigation, and they just look at it and they say, yeah, I like the photo in the background. They don't comment on the nav at all. But you're dying about how crazy the nav is, how much it sucks. If they don't notice, if they don't care, and you care so much, you need to think about that objectively, right? I think a strategy for when you're working on someone else's project, this may or may not influence the way you work on a hackathon, but when you're working on someone else's project, or someone else's business, if you think of your project during the hackathon as something that you're working on that's not yours, it's easier to be objective because it's not yours, it's your team's, it's theirs. Think about it as someone else's. You have to execute on the work, but it helps you be less personal about it because you're judging it from the outside. It's like, hey, we need to get this thing done. It's not mine. I'm doing it for our team, or I'm being employed to do it. So think about it that way. It can help you be a little bit more detached from criticism, or detached from being too specific about something that's your responsibility. So if you're a designer and there's a lot of like critique about the design, just take it as like, oh, they're critiquing the design of this thing. They're not critiquing you as a person. Or if you're a development, you might say, they might say, oh, this thing doesn't work the way it should be. It's not working right. You're like, oh, I see. So accept the feedback, but don't take it as like they're saying that you are doing a bad job, because you're doing the job for the product, for the thing you're going to make after. So you can kind of detach yourself from it. It works with a lot of different things. It even works with like anything, even a part-time job. Detach yourself from the work because it makes it makes you a better worker, because you're more about, you care more, you act more rationally. Here's a cool story. So I was doing a project, this is probably like 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and it was a company that the iPad had just come out, and it was for a company, and they had this like palliative care unit. Palliative care is like when someone's really sick and they need a lot of help, like around the clock. It's basically like an elderly home or whatever you call it, or like hospice care. And so basically they had these iPads. They wanted to show potential customers like a bunch of videos about the facility, or they wanted to bring these videos like around to any of their like showcases and stuff like that, and basically have people talk about the facility and be able to use it as a sales tool. So the iPad had just come out. If you know anything about browsers or old iPads, they're very specific and finicky when it comes to viewing stuff. You might even notice on your iPhone, you might jump to a website, it's like, oh man, this thing just doesn't work right. Or you might be on your Android and you might be like, man, this thing looks like crap on my Android, but it looks great on iPhone. It's like there's differences between browsers. And the differences get way more radical the older the browser gets. So the browsers today are great. They're really fast, they're really efficient, they're great on memory, they're great on battery, they're really quick. They have a lot of features on them that we can use. They have some really sophisticated features, like you can use Bluetooth in your browser now. You can use GPS. If someone here has a MacBook, if you go to like a device orientation page, you can actually move your MacBook up and down and it'll read it on the screen. So your MacBook has like a sensor in it, and you can like move it around, and it like can sense you, and has a GPS in it, and stuff like that. So one of the things about that is that when the iPad just came out, it was brand new. So how do you write something for a device that was created yesterday? Well, it's really difficult because the technology hasn't caught up to the device. The device is new, but the technology isn't there. You probably bought a new phone, and then as you've owned it, updates have come out, and the device has gotten better. The hardware didn't change, but the software running on it did change. So the hardware sometimes can be ahead of the software in terms of like its capabilities, but the software hasn't caught up. We see this a lot with desktop computers. So you buy a desktop computer and it's super fast, but like none of the programs can run in like a 64-bit, or they don't take advantage of the new RAM, or they can't read the hard drive properly because it's like a brand new hard drive. If you've ever built a computer, you probably know like you have to buy a specific motherboard that takes a specific part. But anyway, this company, they wanted to build this like little website portal thing that would allow them to like browse their videos and go through slideshows and stuff, but they wanted it all to work on iPad. They're like, yeah, we're going to be holding an iPad, showing this to customers like in their face, like, look at this is cool, right? Tapping on the screen, playing videos. Cool, we can do that. So I built this like portal thing. It was using all this like old school stuff now that I would never do again because it was hard to build websites for iPad at that point. And there was only one iPad too, so it was like I literally just wrote in the dimensions for like the width. It wasn't responsive. You'd like turn it upside down and like you'd turn it orientation, and it had like loaded different parts of the page and stuff. It was really complicated. These days it would have been way more easy to build it. But basically I finished the project, wrapped it up. It was on time, it was on budget, everything was great, but then they messaged me maybe a couple days later and they're like, hey, the website doesn't work in Internet Explorer. I was like, really? I tested it on desktop just to make sure. But like I wasn't going crazy because I knew that, hey, they're paying for it to work on iPad. They don't want it to work anywhere else. If they did, well, we'd have to increase the budget. And so the lady said, oh yeah, like the company, like they looked at it on the computers and it just doesn't work, and like the layout's all broken. And so I said, yeah, let me get back to you. So I looked it up and I looked at it on the computer. I looked at it on the old Internet Explorer. I got my hands on a crappy Windows computer and had to look it up. But eventually they sort of said like, oh yeah, okay. I looked at it and I'm like, wow, this is a lot of work to like get this going. Like you need to double your budget because like I need to redo all of the site to make it work on old crappy Internet Explorer. And so what they heard was like, what they were thinking from a business perspective is, it is going to cost as much as the entire project so that they can look at it on a device that they're never going to look at it on. So when you think about that, it doesn't make any sense. That's like buying 2 cars when you can't even drive. You can't even drive. Why would you even own 1 car, let alone 2? It doesn't make any sense. So it didn't make any sense logically. But they realized that once I explained, like, hey, so you want to spend the same amount of money, yeah, to add support for an older browser, yeah, that isn't in the browser that you're going to use. Yeah, we want to do that. No, we don't want to do that. So they decided not to do it. It just didn't make sense. The thing is, like, that's about the primary goal. What's the primary goal of the application? View it on iPad, play on iPad, cool. Going and making it work on Internet Explorer, you're getting off your goal, you're getting off the tracks. You've lost your way. Also, that goes into the money thing. How much money do you want to spend on something that doesn't make any difference? How much time do you want to spend on something that doesn't make any difference? That's not the minimum viable rule. So this is important, how to work quickly. It can be really hard to work quickly. You got to decide on the fly what makes sense. So one thing you can think about is something called a happy path. So a happy path is a way you can move through your application from start to finish, from the start to the goal, without encountering any problems at all. No problems whatsoever. You have a perfect experience. Think about Amazon. You land on Amazon's happy path is probably something like this. You land on a product. You land on Amazon. You click on one product and you click buy it now, and it's done. That's probably the thing that they're trying to get you to do the most. Amazon is so crazy about that experience that they can see the change in their revenue based on how quickly their site loads. So if their site is 100 milliseconds slower than normal, they lose money. 100 milliseconds. There's 1,000 milliseconds in 1 second. So 1/10 of a second, they're going to lose money. We're not thinking in those metrics, but we're still concerned about like, okay, well, what is the happy path? How do we get from A to B, from start to finish, without encountering any issues? Like, what is the best way forward look like? The great thing is, like at hackathons, you have the opportunity to show a demo. You only show the happy path in your demo. You never show what happens when it goes wrong, because no one wants to see what happens when it goes wrong. They want to see what happens when it goes right. So why would you spend a bunch of energy on trying to handle a bunch of problems that you aren't even going to encounter because you literally know that they exist? So that kind of brings us to unhappy paths. So how can you handle an unhappy path then? Well, handle it generically. In development, we have this concept of a try-catch. So try something. Did it work? Cool, keep going. Catch an error. Oh, did it error? Okay, handle it. So in JavaScript and a couple of other languages, we can actually we can wrap our code in a big block saying, hey, if something happens, just email me. Don't show the user, just maybe tell them something went wrong, and that's it. We're not going to try to like sell them, give them a discount on their account. We're not going to worry about like how it's going to affect their turnover on the site. We're not going to worry about a negative review. We're not going to worry about any of that stuff. We're going to try to handle problems the generic way, and then we're going to use that to determine how we should handle errors moving forward. So how do designers do this? So like with designers, don't worry about the unhappy path. Worry about the happy path. You shouldn't design a bunch of error screens and like validation errors because we're not caring about that right now. We need to get the user from A to B as quickly as possible in the most like elegant way possible. So design a great experience. Don't design a holistic experience. One great experience is all you really need. So like I said about content, you can probably use content to mitigate a lot of issues too. Hey, if you encounter an error, please email us. Oh, I encountered an error. Maybe I should email them. Oh, I encountered a problem. Maybe I should email them. Google relies on that. If you're on Google Maps, you shake your phone. A little feedback thing will come up. saying, hey, are you having a problem? I think it's like a subconscious thing where you're like, it's broken. And then you can say, yeah, I'm having a problem. This address is wrong, or it sent me into the river, whatever it might do. So even with designers, like design based on feedback. If someone is experiencing your design or looking at it and they're like, man, this seems like really wonky, wait for them to tell you that it's broken before you fix it. So this is another thing to be really conscious of, and this happens all the time. Is like there's a phrase called feature creep. So feature creep happens when someone accidentally introduces a feature. So let's say we're working on a design and we're working on a homepage and we're like, yeah, we need a sign up button. And so it's like, well, what about a sign in button on the homepage too? Yeah, we should have a sign in button. Oh, you know what? Oh, I designed a modal for the sign up now. Oh, so there's a modal now. We don't have any modals on the whole site. So now we need to add modal support. Okay. How do mobiles work on mobile? Oh, yeah, okay, now we need to write a bunch of new styles to get this to work on mobile now. Oh. How's the accessibility of a modal? Not good. Damn it. Okay, so we added one modal and now there's tons of work to do, right? I see it sometimes. It happened to me last week. Someone added a map to a page that listed, it was a page about realtors and stuff, so it listed a property. So the property had a little picture of the map, a little Google Maps like screenshot. Cool. How do we make one of those? Well, I'll tell you right now. You go to Google Maps, the Google Maps API page. You sign up for an application. You whitelist the domain for the website. You get a key in return. You sign that key to the website. You go to that website. You add a script tag. Then in that script tag, you then link to the image. The image has the key inside of it. You pick the size you want. Okay, so we added this map. We added one box on a design. One little box, and it turned into 20 steps of work. So you have to be careful of that. So a good thing to do is think about designing features, not whole experiences. It can be difficult because you want things to be holistic. You want things to flow properly. But at the same time, you also need to get stuff done. So how do you work quickly? We design a little feature, little blocks. Then you add things together, make them more smooth, right? You can combine things as much as you want. All right, in our story, oh man. So I had this application that I was doing for a private members club, and they had a search. So they want to be able to search all their members. Cool, so we can do that. We have all the member details, so all we need to do is search through the details. The issue was when I went back and looked at the mock-ups of the design, there's a table of data. The problem was that the table of data didn't actually correlate to how the data was stored in our application, which meant I had to do a bunch of extra work in order to connect all the data points I needed in order to show this table. So imagine you have, let's say you have a pair of pants, a shirt, and a hat. Let's see if this analogy is working off the cuff. A hat, a pair of pants, and a shirt. So someone's like, I want you to design an outfit that's formal. It's okay, well, I have dress pants, I have a t-shirt, and I have a fedora. Okay, how am I going to make this work? I can't not wear a shirt, but the shirt that I have is not formal. The pants are formal, and the hat kind of formal, but not really. So it was one of these problems where what we were given to work with was actually really hard to make fit into the scenario. But that was my own ignorance of not properly paying attention to the design. Because if I really looked and really paid attention, oh wait, it would be a lot easier if we didn't have this column, and instead maybe we have this column instead. So me not paying attention enough made it really difficult for me to create this feature. We managed to get it done. The problem is it took 2 days instead of one, or instead of half a day. So that kind of brings me to this point, which is compromise on features, not experience. So I talked about social sign-in with SoundCloud. That's a feature. It doesn't actually affect their experience. They can still sign in normally. They have to. We don't have no choice but to support traditional sign-in. Adding social sign-in, maybe that's a great feature, but it doesn't actually affect the experience. If it affects the experience, then it's not necessarily a feature anymore. It might be part of the experience. Maybe social sign-in allows them to link songs they've already uploaded in SoundCloud. oh, well, that's actually like a pretty big feature. That's a different experience if you're signing in with SoundCloud. But if all it does is they click 2 buttons instead of 1, I don't see that as a feature. So here's some like different little cheat sheets. Some of you are probably going to be doing like website type stuff during the hackathon. So I sort of made this little table of like things that you probably think you should do, and then things you can still do but get the same results. So let's say this is the fancy side, the left side of the chart. I can use WordPress. I can use a CMS to make a website. Oh, I can install like some plugins, and like I can have a field of content. I can manage it like dynamically. I could use Amazon S3 and like store all my files in the cloud and like put a CDN in front of it, and like it'll handle millions of requests a second. You know, if my site gets on the front page of Reddit tomorrow, it's gonna hold up nicely. Okay, that's great. That sounds really cool. But you know, you could just use a static website. You could just write HTML without any like CMS. You have 24 hours. It's quicker to write in the content than it is to actually hook up the CMS that can generate content for you. So why install fancy plugins and stuff like that to handle forms? There's other ways to do forms. There's ways to do forms without even like adding them to your site. You can use things like WooForms or Google Forms. So you can use these cheat sheets. They don't always look the best. That's the thing. They kind of look like shit sometimes. Google Forms especially. It's not the prettiest thing in the world. Maybe you are a little bit concerned about like, you know, your website's ability to withstand some traffic. So there are tools like Cloudflare, a free tool. You literally sign up for an account, add your domain to it, and then point it at your site, and it just like backs your whole site up and like handles like millions and millions of hits. So if you ever get DDoS'd during a hackathon, you'll be fine. Here's another thing. So doing forms is a big thing of like in web. Like everyone fills out forms all the time. I bet everyone here has a story about a bad form experience. I once had trouble paying my TELUS bill because I couldn't fill out their form because it just wouldn't submit. It's really painful. So here's some fancy stuff. Ooh, I have a front-end crop and resize for photo uploads. Ooh, that's a nice experience. Oh, I implemented compression and resize. Whenever you upload photos, it just automatically crops them and shrinks them down. Maybe it applies like a cool filter to it. Oh, I'm using social login. Ooh, social login. I hooked all the social login up. I talked about validation. Ooh, I have custom validation on all my fields for all like the crazy stuff I need to do. Cool. That's cool. But could you have them just upload the photo full size? Like, does that matter? Could you put a limit on the file size? Maybe say, you can't upload more than 2 megs. That could eliminate a lot of these huge photos. That may even eliminate the problem entirely if you say 1 megabyte. Maybe you don't want to have them sign into every social network, but maybe you just put a list of fields where they can paste the link to their account. I do that all the time. People understand empty fields when you say, put this in here. Social login is a little something else. Maybe you have, instead of having a complex validation for one field, maybe you spread the phone number out over a couple fields. Maybe have you ever seen one of those phone number fields where it's like area code, whatever the first 3 numbers are in the last 4? Well, it's kind of hard to screw that up because you have 3 boxes, 3, 3, and 4. You can't screw it up. You don't have to write some sort of custom phone number validation. You don't have to write this stuff. You can just be a little bit more clever about how you're sort of presenting stuff to the user. Not kind of like you can use content to mitigate these issues. So people probably have heard of Bootstrap. It's like a Twitter thing that lets you like make your site really quickly by using forms and like fields, and it's like basically pre-styled content. So like I'm not a huge fan of it because I always find that I'm always fighting it. So here's a couple of rules. It's like when should you use Bootstrap? You should probably use it if your application is for developers because they just don't really care about that type of stuff. They don't care about things looking pretty. They care about functionality, not how it looks. When you actually need to use all these components, you need modals, you need forms, you need drop-downs, you need custom buttons, you need all like fancy tables, like you need all this stuff. Maybe you decided I should use this framework. You can make it work without adding any additional CSS. You can make it work without adding additional JavaScript. If you can just kind of make it work right away, that might be a great opportunity. Something that's really important is you want it to look like every other website. That's a joke. You don't want your site to look like every other website because that's no good. You don't stand out, especially in a hackathon. So what should you do properly? I talked about things you can just like skip and like go over and like who cares? Just kind of like fake it. Just kind of make it work. Well, onboarding is something you should do properly. Tell your users how your thing works. Tell them how they can get the most out of it. Tell them about how valuable your thing is. Maybe people keep leaving your site after they sign up because they just don't know how to use your site. Well, that's a great time to onboard someone and say, hey, this is how you use my site. It happens all the time. If you sign up for any app, there's always a couple screens of stuff. Like, oh yeah, this is how it works. This is how it works. I mean, if you wanted to try something, try creating a new account on Facebook just from scratch and see how much onboarding they have when you sign up. Try signing up for a service you already use all the time. Maybe sign up for Snapchat again and see what happens, or sign up for Instagram and see what happens. So I think, although I was saying a lot of stuff about design, I think branding can actually help you get really far. By using strong branding, you can kind of make assumptions about other parts of your tool. So like maybe your main color is blue. Hey, guess what your button link color is? It's blue. Oh my god, it's the blue that your brand is. Oh, maybe your secondary color in your brand is like a red color. Ooh, guess what? The header has a red menu in it. So you can use branding to sort of like guide you without actually having to design every single piece of your application. So a strong brand, like, does anyone know what the color of Facebook is? It's blue. What's the color of Twitter? Blue. What's SoundCloud? I mentioned SoundCloud. It's like an orange. Snapchat, yellow. Instagram, I don't know. That one's like a rainbow. So that one's hard, but I mean, they can use those things. They use those things all over the place. Snapchat's got all yellow stuff. Facebook, all the stuff is blue. Twitter, all the stuff is a different shade of blue. So they know how to do things because they have a strong brand. They know how to make decisions based on what their brand looks like. So security is another thing. I don't know if this will apply to too many people in the hackathon, but something you shouldn't really compromise on is security. There was that huge Equifax hack that happened, and like 150 million Americans lost their important financial details. I don't think it'll apply to anyone necessarily at the hackathon, but it probably should be something that you should think about. Don't let that become secondary, because it happens where you put something up and you forget about it, and like people use your app and all of a sudden you've like leaked their information by accident. I actually have a story about this, an unfortunate story. I was working on a project for like a larger company, and they were collecting emails and stuff for different users, and we were tasked to basically just make a export so they could export all the people that signed up. And so we had a form capturing a bunch of information, and then basically we made a button inside the CMS. You click it, and it basically just generates a CSV, and then they download it. The problem was it generated a CSV in a public directory, which meant someone could just go to this directory and like see the file and just download it. A couple problems there. One, public directory listing shouldn't have been turned on. And two, we shouldn't have put it somewhere anyway. We should have just created it in the CMS or shown them a list or something. So it's kind of two fails at that point. So it was a big problem because someone found the file and like told a newspaper about it. And like, hey, I found this file for like this big company, and like it's got everyone's email in it. And we're like, uh-oh, that sucks. And so we get an angry phone call saying, hey, what the hell did you do? The crazy thing is the client asked us to do exactly what we did. So that was the point where we put a feature ahead of security. We did what they asked for, but it compromised their security. And then they paid the price, right? They look like they don't know what they're doing. We look like we don't know what we're doing. So that's a really tough one where it's like, yeah, it's like, well, we were working on a project and we leaked a bunch of info. That sucks. Sucks for everybody. So, I mean, you know, a bunch of things you can do good, but maybe I should just summarize a couple of things you should do badly. Features. Don't do a bunch of features that you can't do properly. Just try to do the features that you can. Don't just try to shove a ton of features in just because you have, like, you think it's the MVP is, like, tons of features. I mentioned Craigslist. Craigslist has, like, 2 features. I think it has, basically has 1 feature you can post. And you can, like, browse posts, but that's a feature that's based on whether or not there's a post that's available for you to browse. I think maybe the only other thing that really has in terms of features is, like, you can, like, search for things by location, and that's still part of search, so that's still the same feature. Or you can like subscribe to a search feed, which is still search. So basically it's 2 features, post and search. I don't think I can boil it down to any simpler. What's their primary goal? Get people to post. How do they get people to post? Have other stuff for sale. Prove you can make people, prove you can sell stuff. I think that's a little bit more harder to prove for Craigslist, but it's an idea of like, what is their primary goal? You can look at Craigslist from a design perspective. It looks terrible. It just looks like it's from like 1999. What about Toggle? Has anyone used Toggle before? It's a time tracking app. It's basically got like one feature, it's track time. That's it. In a table. That's about it. It tracks time in a table. What's their primary goal? Track your time. How do they do it? You type your time in and it tracks it. Calendly. Has anyone used Calendly before? It's kind of a cool app. Yeah, so you can like share a link with someone and it'll tell you like what part of their schedule is open. What's their primary goal? Get people to book meetings. That's it. That's all it does. It books meetings. That's it. It doesn't even like have video chat or anything. It doesn't facilitate the meeting anyway. It's just like, oh, I see this person is an opening. Click that. Now it's mine. That's it. Trello is another one, which is like probably a little more sophisticated. It has it's a board, and you basically put your tasks in different columns, and you can move them along those columns based on your progress. So you might have like tasks for Tuesday, and you might have like tasks for Friday. So you might move tasks to Friday, or you might have beginning, middle, and end. Maybe you're working on like a story or something. You're like, yeah, these are the things I want to get through in the middle. These are the things I want to get through at the end. And so you can kind of use it to organize tasks both vertically and horizontally. But at the end, they have one thing, which is like a task. What is Trello's primary goal? Get you to complete tasks. Everything revolves around a task. It has other things. You can like add files to tasks. You can comment on tasks. But at the end of the day, if a task doesn't exist, Trello doesn't have anything to offer you. So it's important to think about like, what is their feature set? What can you do badly? You can have no features. One feature, two features. Analytics. So is it important to be tracking your analytics during the 2-day hackathon? I don't know. I don't think it would be worth your time. Would it be important to track whether something bad happened in your app? Yeah, actually, because then you know what to fix. If an error you thought that no one would encounter, is it being encountered every 5 seconds? Well, maybe you should fix that error. If the error you thought everyone was going to encounter every 5 seconds never occurs, leave it out. Who cares? No one's ever experienced the error, so why would we even fix it? Remember, we're working with a strict timeline and a strict budget in the literal sense. Like we only have so much time we can spend. So what do you build? What do you actually make? The minimum viable product. That's it. That's all we're trying to make. I have a hackathon story. That's pretty interesting. I went to a hackathon once, and the goal of the hackathon was to like see what you can build in like 2 days, right? So I had this team of like 7 people. We had like a couple developers, a designer, we had a business guy. We had 2 business guys, so they were doing like research, they were building presentations, they were doing searching on competition, they were like testing the viability of our business model. So at the end, we had a presentation and we had a demo of our app. The crazy thing was, the thing that really made me upset was that all they cared about was the presentation. That was it. All they cared about was the presentation. We put all this energy in like putting it into like, oh, we gotta get like a crazy website. Oh, we gotta get like this crazy thing. We have to like amazing branding. We should like pay some people to like use our app so they can like give us feedback. Like we had all this crazy stuff. We went insane, and no one cared, right? No one noticed. So we put all this energy in. We didn't understand the problem we were trying to solve, which was like communicate a viable business plan. But all we did was build an app. So that was like a perfect example of you didn't do what they asked. You didn't do anything anyone cared about. All right. Does anyone have any questions about MVPs? I feel like we covered a lot. Some people were so full of information they had to leave. That's what I'm thinking. No questions? Oh, Jan?
Okay, question. So, how do you handle the problem that the teammates that have different strengths and they want to work on different features, and you need to have like a key feature? You do figure out like, what you want to do, right?
Yeah, I think the thing is like if you look at my list here of like the case study, sort of fake case study thing is like, if you do one of these, it's kind of hard to argue with like, oh, we need to support chat. Wow, chat isn't on here. Our primary goal is to get people to post. We can't work on chat unless we can get them to post first, or at least get them to hear before we work on chat. So I think having the primary goal being like, what is the thing that, like, most of the time the primary goal is what makes you money, like really. Unless you're selling ads or something, and I had this conversation today with someone about, we're working on a site that's very content heavy, it's in like a news site, and they sell ads, and so they make money by people looking at their articles. So what's their primary goal is to get people to read their articles, get people to spend time, it's not even read their articles, it's get people to look at their ads, that's their primary goal. How do we get them to look at their ads? We generate content they want to read. How do we generate content that they want to read? Through the CMS that we're going to make. So it's kind of this, that one's a strange one because they don't necessarily make money by the primary goal. It's not something you can necessarily measure until it's too late. So for something like this though, is like, does the feature fit within the primary goal? Because if it doesn't, we can make a good argument that it shouldn't be in there. If someone wants to work on something that's like tangentially related to it, like, oh, I want to work on like video posting. Cool. Like maybe we can have that conversation about, oh, well maybe we should switch to like posting video. We still need them to post, but maybe they're posting videos instead of posting pictures, or instead of posting text. Like if Twitter just all of a sudden said no more text or photos, it's all video. It's basically just Instagram at that point. But like maybe that's a thing. Maybe that's a viable thing to talk about. But it's a subset of a feature that already needs to exist. Cool. Anything else? Anything else? No? Nothing else? Run all the way back to the end. I have a couple more. I have one more slide that says, if you have any feedback or any stories about projects, I'd be interested to hear them. Or if you had any like case study type of things, like, hey, I had this problem. What would I do to fix it? I'd be interested to hear about it. Or if you fix a problem through something like this, I'd be interested to hear that because I'm trying to like, I make it a part of my philosophy at work is to try to make it so that we can deliver a lot of stuff or a lot of quality over a lot of quantity, because quantity means that we're doing a lot of stuff badly. I'd rather do a few things really, really well. So yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you, James. That was a very inspirational and thought-provoking talk, and I hope all of you pretty much already know what you're going to do for your hackathon. Oh, cool. Yeah, and James is going to be there as a mentor, and you guys, if you guys have any questions, you guys can ask him on